We are back on the road to City Hall here inside the Talking Transition tent on Canal Street right near 6th Avenue. It's open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and you are welcome to join us down here. Mayor Bloomberg's education policy has been a source of both controversy and acclaim, from the growth of charter schools to the creation of numerous small specialized academies. This has sparked strong feelings from parents, politicians, and educators, all of whom are anxiously awaiting Mayor-elect Bill de Blasio's policies. Here now to talk more about the future of education in our city are three principals. Their schools are all part of the NYC Outward Bound program. Elise Barr is from the Brooklyn School for Collaborative Studies. Matt Brown is from Brooklyn's Kurt Hahn Expeditionary Learning School. And Brett Kimmel is from the Washington Heights Expeditionary Learning School. Thanks for joining us, and good to see you.
Good to see you.
And let me start with you, Matt. Explain what Outward Bound is.
Sure. New York City Outward Bound Schools is a network that operates expeditionary learning schools here in the city. It's 11 different schools that all follow the same general model, which believes very deeply in authentic assessment, in being able to have students do real-world projects in addition to the New York City standards of Regents, or New York State standards of Regents exams and course credits, but also trying to push beyond that and have students really pay attention to their character development, to their leadership development. We have an advisory structure which really forms the basis of a lot of the work that our schools do, called CREW. And it's a network of schools that believe very passionately in students being able to do more than they think is possible and trying to push that.
One or two of you, or is it all of the schools that take the kids out on like a 4 or 5 week hiking trip?
Not a 4 or 5 week, more like a 4 or 5 day.
4 or 5 days, okay.
Yeah.
But some of the core principles of Outward Bound, which is a name people are more familiar with, formed the model of expeditionary learning, which is a national model. There's almost 200 expeditionary learning schools throughout the country. NYC Outward Bound manages and us as they are the partner that runs the New York City Outward Bound, the EL schools in New York City, and they partner with the DOE.
Well, let me ask all of you. We earlier tonight reported on sort of a transition between the current administration and the new administration. The schools that are scheduled for closing just came out today. On the other hand, we have a mayor-elect who's saying, that's not what we're going to do. He wants to have a moratorium. It's not clear what's going to happen to these particular schools. Where does that leave folks like you? I mean, none of you are on that list, obviously, but where does that leave a principal in wondering whether or not his or her institution is going to get reworked, revamped, or shut down?
I think the thing for principals to focus on each day is what can we do to ensure that teaching and learning is happening in our school each day. And it's an interesting time right now because there is a transition. We're in the Talking Transition tent. But for us, we can only focus on what's under our control, and that's to make sure that our teachers have the resources and the support that they need, that our kids have what they need, that our families are engaged in that, so that there's optimal teaching and learning happening in school. I think in the next few months we'll see. And to colleagues who might be wondering, I think we would all suggest do what you would do every day to make sure teaching and learning is happening. And as Mayor-elect de Blasio takes office, we'll find out what the initiatives will be.
The one time I served as principal for a day, I got the distinct impression that what you all do is mostly kind of run around and try and get resources out of places outside the building and try your best to manage what's going on inside the building, but that it's a juggling act every single day. Is that about right?
It's a planned juggling act. There are many aspects to the job, some of which are spontaneous and some of which are long range and short range planned. And because we work with human children who are often very spontaneous in their actions, there will always be exciting and interesting things that come up in the course of a day that we might not have planned, that we will address. But no one works this job without a plan, a daily plan, a yearly plan, a vision of where they're going with their school. Mm-hmm. And that's they work on that with their constituencies and with the Department of Education.
There's another change that's coming as we go from one administration to the next, and that's the use of the letter grades to sort of summarize a school. Right. I know there are a lot of different opinions about that. What did you all think of that?
Well, I think, we've talked about this quite a bit actually in the tent right next door, that in the progress reports there's actually quite a bit of information and data that's helpful. It's helpful to principals, it's helpful to parents, it's helpful to the groups that support us, and trying to figure out how we access the resources that you spoke about, but most importantly, achieve the mission that Brett talks about in terms of, are we making teaching and learning happen in our building every day, and are we getting better in our ability to do that with a wider and wider range of students? So I think that there's aspects of the progress report that provide that info. I think there's important pieces of information that often aren't there, and I think that that's stuff that we'd be interested to see if the mayor-elect is able to support schools broadening their vision of what we're measuring and reporting on. And I think that, that since the mayor-elect has said that he feels like that's too narrowly focused, that it's probably a good idea for us to take some stock of that and say, let's not let one single letter grade be a distraction from the really complicated but important questions around how to move teaching and learning.
Do you all support, I guess, generally the notion of parents going through the data, whether it's just the summary number or any other indicator, and trying to make decisions based on that, or should they be using some other criteria?
Well, I think all data should be accessible to people, but I think that the data that's used has some significant flaws in it, and I would agree with the mayor-elect that these are too narrowly focused on test scores. At the same time, I also think that the actual use of test scores is using a measurement that is intended for one thing to measure something else. So these tests were designed to measure student learning, and suddenly they are now being used to evaluate whole schools, teachers, principals, and to further complicate and cloud the issue, they're norm reference tests, so someone has to be at the bottom. There's no absolute standard of what makes a first grader, this is first grade reading, if you achieve this, we can all achieve this, and then we can all go on. But it's not like that. These tests are designed with a norm in mind, knowing that some children have to be left behind, and some schools have to be left behind. And schools, instead of being able to collaborate with each other and collaboration being fostered because we're all trying to lift each other up, there's this competition. There will be this many A's given, and if you don't get into that pack, you'll get a B. Well, that's not an absolute standard, and it's very hard to know where you are if the target's always moving.
I just want to add real quickly, I think we all agree and believe in transparency of data and using data to inform ourselves, to inform our families,
Absolutely.
to inform our teachers and our students about what's working well and what needs to be improved. The thing I would caution about the progress reports in particular is that while the data that's there is very, very powerful and very, very useful, the metrics that are used are very, very complicated. So for any person just to pick up a progress report and look at it and attempt to make sense of it in a matter of 30 seconds or a minute or even 5 minutes, I think is very, very difficult to do. And so we spend a lot of time, it's the work of principals and teachers and schools to really understand what is this data telling us. The danger in looking at the progress report is assuming it's telling you one thing when not understanding fully what the metrics really are measuring.
Right. I noticed that for your school in Washington Heights, about half your teachers, and you yourself, are from Teach for America, which is a program to try and get folks who might not have considered education as a career to come into the profession. How has that worked out?
Well, Teach for America, for me personally, was my entry into becoming a teacher. And as you mentioned, I'm a Teach for America alum, and over 50% of my teachers are as well, closer to 60%. For us, it's a network of folks who have decided that they want to be career educators. So we are not necessarily a place where we have so many current Teach for America core members. We have one, but instead we have 15 or 20 people who are in their 5th, 8th, 10th, 20th year as an educator, and Teach for America was simply the vehicle that they used to enter the profession.
In our last minute, one of the things that the Bloomberg administration tried to focus on, especially under Chancellor Klein, was strengthening principals, right? They had the Principals Academy, and you all were supposed to be given sort of more power and, I guess, with it more accountability for what goes on in the building. Has that been successful, and do you expect that to continue?
I think to a certain extent it has been successful, and we all agree that we value our autonomy and are willing to accept accountability, but we want it to be authentic accountability. We want to be accountable for things we have support and ability to do. We want to have resources to do them, and we want to have measurements that are accurate measurements of our work. So I think that there's a great deal of progress has been made in making principals understand that they have some choices and offering them some different kinds of support choices. We're part of a specific network of New York City Outward Bound schools. We chose to be part of that network, and I think it's been a good experience for us, and we can commit resources to that, and other principals can choose other things, and families have some choice around what kinds of education they want for their children. But we want those choices to be available for all people, and we don't want it to be only some people can have access to this and maybe a smaller group has access to that.
Okay, that is going to be the last word. Elise, thank you for joining us. Matt, good to see you.
Thank
Brett,
you.
thanks for joining us as well. We are going to take a short break. Coming up, our own Zach Fink will speak with one of the people tasked with keeping the rhythm going here inside the transition tent. Find out what that's all about in just a minute. We're back in a moment.